can get to #1 in the bestsellers, I'll be astonished. And Michael Brandon and Jill Halfpenny read it for us. I have to say, we had a lot of celebrities wanted to come on this show to talk about this book. They got hold of it, they phoned us up and said, have you booked somebody to talk about it? They said, these guys are doing it. Oh, can we do it instead? No, they're booked. Because people liked it so much. You actually did the audio book, didn't you? You've actually read it.
So I got to read it a lot.
And meet the author as well.
I did. I had lunch with him, and as we were having lunch, I said to him, you know, it seems to me there's a relationship between... I didn't read any of his other books until I did this. Now I've read 13 of his books. I mean, I'm just going through everything. I love it. He just really gets it, you know. He got L.A. so down. And the fact that I lived there for years, all the streets, I know exactly where everything's happening, you know. So the visuals really worked for me.
It manages to be seedy and glamorous at the same time, doesn't it? It's both seedy and glamorous on the same page sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not the type of book I would usually read, so when I found out what kind of book it was, I thought, oh, I might find this difficult.
So you're not into crime books?
Well,
no.
Not now I would be.
You would be
now.
Well, that's...
within the first page, that was it. I was hooked. I was straight in. I thought, wow. I didn't think that this would be the type of book that I would like, but I loved it.
In fact, you recognised the courthouse in there, didn't you? Because wasn't your divorce file? Well, first divorce.
Yeah, a lot of things give you the willies in this, you know.
What I found was fascinating was this concept of a defence attorney who actually operates, his office is the back of his car. And the reason for that is that apparently LA is just so enormous and there are so many courthouses sprawled. The only way they can kind of get from one to the other, these guys think, is by actually making themselves mobile.
Well, to get from the prison to the court for the indictments and up and back and seeing all the clients.
It struck me, I don't know about you, it struck me, I was quite surprised initially by how cynical the whole business is and how much they do. They're like gallants looking for money, aren't they, these defence attorneys, just pouncing on anything they can get.
What does he call this guy?
The franchise. He's looking for the franchise client, the guy who they can charge the A-list.
That's right.
You know, there's the B-list is what they can afford. The A-list, if they get somebody, will go from indictment to trial and appeal.
Well, in the early part of the book, the client, who becomes the other central character of the book, it looks like actually he's going to get him off before the case even comes to court. And as a lawyer and as a man who represents the downtrodden, he's kind of pleased that he's going to get his guy off the hook. On the other hand, he's saying all this money that he was going to get.
That he's not going to get,
And that's what I loved about the book, because as well as being a fantastic thriller that has so many twists and turns, but which are easy to follow, you've got this moral dilemma, haven't you?
Yeah, and then in contrast to the kind of the law impact that it has, you've got this kind of vulnerability that goes on with his ex-wife and that lovely
daughter.
The prosecutor.
And the lovely bit where she takes him home and he says, "Oh, stay a bit longer."
Is that when he's drunk?
Stay a bit longer. You know, and you know.
So you see a guy who's really sort of emotionally, morally, to a certain extent, washed up at the beginning of the book. That's how he is. He's just someone zipping between courthouses in his Lincoln, he's doing deals, trying to scrape as much money as he can because he has, you know, he's got 2 sets of alimony to pay and all the rest of it. And then things go... He suddenly discovers he's got a conscience and he can't...
Well, he's faced with a dilemma, isn't he? I mean, he says that his father was a lawyer, his late father, and there's this wonderful phrase that's repeated in the book. The one thing a defence attorney doesn't want to have, his biggest nightmare, is a client who's innocent. Because then if you dummy up, and if you cut a deal with the prosecution, you're letting your client down. I mean, anything else, you've got a guilty client, fine, you know, do the best you can for him. And it's that dilemma that he has to face up to, isn't it?
Well, he's got the other side of that, where he's got one client in there who's done a lot of time, and is he really guilty? You know, so it's like he made him take a deal. You know,
was that the right thing to do?
And then the whole idea that's always fascinated me anyway about defence lawyers, when they clearly know that somebody has done what they've done, but
yet
they're still putting all them hours
and
in.
His justification for doing that. You know? I mean, they all question, how can you defend a man you know raped and murdered a woman? And he gives that explanation, you know. It's I think it's
well, I love it when he comes in and his ex-wife, who's the prosecutor, and you know, they call her Maggie McPherce, she's McPherson, and she's going to go for no bail, you know, and he says, so how is she? And he said, how is she? She's terrified. She's in the hospital. She's been beat up. You don't mean the victim, do you? You mean your daughter. You know, there's great stuff. I mean, the underbelly of all of it, you know, the machinations and the manipulation that's going on behind the trial, getting all this stuff.
And it's about halfway through, and it moves very, very quickly to this point. Suddenly it's his life that's on the line. It's his life that's in danger, his family that's under threat, his daughter that's under threat. We're not giving anything away here. And I must say, I think the denouement, and there is a shooting, again, not giving anything away, it's one of the best tautly written shooting episodes I think I've ever read.
My heart was pounding.
Yeah, you do. You think, oh, it's you with a gun, is it?
Yeah.
Jeez, you know, you're the...
His writing is just so economic as well.
Yes.
In 2 sentences.
Short sentences.
Yeah, and you're like,
terse.
wow, I know exactly, I can just understand completely what you're trying to tell me, or I've got an image of that person in 2 sentences.
Yeah, and what I think... Sorry, no, go ahead.
It's when he puts in just that, like a sentence, that gives you the texture of the whole environment, you know, that works with all the tautness that goes on. Then all of a sudden you just get the smell and the taste and the whole thing of it.
He has a horrible encounter, doesn't he, with a horrible Los Angeles detective, a real cynic, a bent cop and all the rest of it. And they end up sitting next to each other on a bench in a park, and the LA cop is eating his lunch, which is a peanut butter and sardine sandwich. And this horrible meal permeates the entire conversation. He constantly refers to it, this awful, awful sandwich. And, you know, I can taste that sandwich. Sorry, Judy.
It's funny, because I was going to ask you, actually, Jill. I mean, it's a very masculine novel in the sense that it's dripping with testosterone, you know, and you know, it's that drive all the way through it. And therefore, I mean, I'm a crime addict, so a crime novel addict, so I love it anyway.
You're addicted to crime, aren't you?
No. But so I mean, I love it anyway. But were you surprised to find that you loved such a masculine novel, the way it was driven? You didn't miss really a love interest. Well, there was a sort of love interest, but not a big emotional
No, I was
stuff.
surprised, because usually I would go for very emotive books, you know, emotion driven, and usually I could read 3 pages about how somebody felt or how somebody looked at somebody. But I absolutely was just enthralled, because he just drew me in straight away. I just wanted to know more about him, who he was and what drove him. So I just became kind of, it was kind of like magnetic, really, the character.
And are his other books as good, then? Because I haven't read any of his others.
Yeah. You're in for a treat.
I can't wait.
I mean, I just started after this. I thought, well, let's read about it, because this stands alone. This has nothing to do with the Bosch series, the Harry Bosch.
That's his main character, the one he normally writes about.
A dozen of those stories. And now you understand why. But he's written this guy, Mickey Haller, like he's written a dozen of them. I mean, he's so solid
exactly.
a character.
You feel you know him, don't you? Straight away. It's a great achievement. And I'll tell you what, it's really interesting that British crime writers, brilliant as they are, they don't write like that. They can't write like that. It's a very American style. British crime writers tend to write much more psychological stuff and more kind of emotional, you know, which is great, but that is fantastic.
The Times calls it a terrific courtroom drama, and The Independent said it was a crime writing genius. Literary review, brilliantly plotted, expert, absorbing. It's just, I mean, it's a cracker. Guys, you've got to read it. I'd recommend it to anybody. Anybody can read should read this book. It's fantastic.
OK, and it is the last one in our book club, but it's a really good finish. And now we're going over to this week's reading group for their thoughts on this book. It's the Lincoln Lawyer, and the reading group is the Peckham Library Group.